Hello, welcome to our webinar today. You've reached the right place to learn about how your organization's brand can help with your people-powered campaigns. My name is Lawrence Grodeska. I'm really delighted to have you all with us, and it's going to be a really great webinar. Our friends from Big Duck are joining us, and we'll introduce them in just a minute, but wanted to get started with a quick agenda of what we'll be covering today. We'll, as I mentioned, talk about who will be joining us today, and then we'll jump right into the concept of brand raising, which is a great framework for your organization's communications with your supporters, for everything from your social media to your fundraising campaigns. And we'll actually be talking about some really great examples that we've seen on change.org of organizations that have used very smart brand-centric communications in their campaigns that have made real impact and raised quite a bit of money for them. We'll have plenty of time for questions and wrap-up, and to do that, if you have any questions, if there's anything that you are confused about, that you want to know more about, please ask those questions in the chat window on the left-hand side of your screen. We'll be monitoring those and answering them as we go and at the end. Plenty of time, though, so please let us know what you'd like to hear more about. We do have a hashtag for today's webinar. That's BRChange, and we'll be doing some live tweeting. And if you see anything or hear anything that really interests you and is sort of an aha light bulb moment, feel free to share it at that hashtag. We'd love to get a conversation started. One more small housekeeping event or item. We will be recording this webinar, and I'll be following up with a video to this webinar so that you can revisit when you have time and if you have some questions about what we covered. All right, and without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker today, the one and only, the amazing Sarah Durham. She is the principal and founder of Big Duck. Big Duck is a nonprofit communications firm that has done really great work helping nonprofits optimize their communications and their brand in everything that they do. Sarah is the principal and founder of Big Duck and author of the very smart Brandraising, How Nonprofits Raise Visibility and Money Through Smart Communications book. Highly recommend you check that out if you haven't already. We'll be covering a lot of that material today, but the book is a wealth of more information about how your organization can use a strong brand to have a greater impact and connect more deeply with supporters. Sarah also teaches aspiring nonprofit communication geeks at NYU's Wagner School. All of us geeks here on the call today, welcome Sarah. How are you, Sarah?
Hey, I'm great, Lawrence. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so what is the weather like in Brooklyn today?
It's a gorgeous day in Brooklyn. You hear the dulcet tones of the subway rumbling over the Manhattan Bridge by my office. Ah, great. Excellent. And for those of you that may not know, Sarah and the Big Duck office are in Dumbo neighborhood of Brooklyn, which I think is down underneath the Manhattan-Brooklyn overpass. Is that right? Yeah, pretty good. No. Down underneath the Manhattan Bridge overpass, I think, but that's Manhattan-Brooklyn overpass is even better.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, thank you for joining us. Really an honor to have you here with us today. My name is Lawrence Grodeska. I am the Director of Nonprofit Community at change.org. I'm calling in from San Francisco, and it's my role at change.org to help organizations like yours understand how you can benefit from the world's largest petition platform, 45 million active engaged supporters that are taking action on our site, and I help organizations understand how to connect with those supporters through our free petitions and our paid supporter acquisition services and webinars just like this. Also joining us today is my colleague, Megan Tyke. She's a client manager at change.org, and she helps our clients get their sponsor campaigns up and running, helps them with strategies to get the biggest impact out of the work that they're doing on change.org and find the right supporters for their campaigns and for their objectives. And before change.org, Megan actually worked with Sarah at Big Duck, which is one of the reasons why she's here with us today. How's it going, Sarah? Megan.
Hi, Lawrence. It's going well. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Great. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing your take on the brand raising framework now that you've been at change.org for a little while. We've already had some great conversations about that leading up to this webinar. So that's the drill. Again, if you have any questions please enter them in the chat window. I want to give a quick shout out to 2 organizations that we'll be featuring later on. One of them just piped up on the chat. Dana Patterson from the Edison Wetlands Association is on the line, so thank you so much, Dana, for joining us. Edison Wetlands Association is a local nonprofit in New Jersey that runs great campaigns to protect the wetlands of New Jersey, and we'll be talking about the work that they've done and how it's really created some great brand integrity between their supporters. Also on the webinar today, we'll be talking about Share Our Strengths No Kid Hungry program, and these examples are really tailored to demonstrate how the brand communications that Sarah will talk about can be used effectively in practice in your campaigns every day. So thank you all again for joining us. A quick overview of change.org. We are the world's petition platform. You've probably seen a petition, maybe you've received an email from us. At this point, there are, as I mentioned, 45 million users in every country of the world, and to the tune of 30,000 organizations have collected over 70 million signatures. Organizations recognize that people are coming to change.org to engage with causes they care about, and we're the platform that not only empowers individuals to create change, but also empowers organizations to find the supporters they need to do good work and achieve their objectives around people-powered campaigns. I won't talk too much more about change.org, but to mention our sponsor campaigns, which is really the mechanism by which we can offer organizations like yours a chance to find the right supporters. If you're doing a fundraising campaign, if you're doing an advocacy campaign, our sponsor campaigns connect you with engaged new supporters. And the model looks something like this. Someone starts a petition on change.org, they share it through their social networks, and people sign it. Thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are letting us know what they care about and where they live. And after someone signs a petition on change.org, we're able to target the campaigns of our clients to those people that have signed petitions. And if that signer is interested in the petition, the sponsor petition that they see, they have the ability to sign that sponsor petition and interact and connect with the organization who created that sponsor petition. And then the organization has the ability to cultivate that supporter into a donor or an advocate and develop that long-term relationship that's so important for community building and effective campaigns down the road. If you'd like to learn anything more about that, I'm available. My contact information will be up later on. I will stop talking and hand it over to Sarah Durham to tell us a little bit about Big Duck and then get into brand raising.
Great. Thanks, Lawrence. So it's a lot of fun to be here today with the good folks at change.org, because what you're going to see and what we're going to show you today is how some of the principles that are relevant to brand development really come to life in campaigning, and change.org really does that beautifully. So the Edison's wetland example that Lawrence touched on earlier and the No Kid Hungry example, we're going to get into those later, and we're going to sort of look at some of the ways that you can make this all happen. But my goal for the first piece of this is to give you some of the theory behind the practice, so that as you're looking at your own campaigns and communications, you have some context for that. And as Lawrence mentioned, I'm the principal and founder of a company called Big Duck. This is the view out my window. This is what I'm looking at right now, and actually the weather looks just like this today. We tend to work with larger and mid-sized organizations, and we help them with a lot of brand raising and campaigns work. And a lot of what I'm going to go over is really stuff that is like best practices that we've found are universally true, no matter how small or large your organization is. So today we're using the hashtag #BRChange, and you'll see that on a lot of the slides in this deck. But you can also find me on Twitter at BigDuckSarah, and I generally am also participating in the conversation at the hashtag #BrandRaising. So let's dig in and talk about what brand raising is. And I want to get into a little bit of sort of marketing and communications theory just to kick that off. I think one of the reasons we even have to have this conversation is that most people who work in the nonprofit sector came to their work for lots of reasons that are really mission driven. They're inspired by the cause, and they may not be MBAs in marketing. They may not be people who, when they were 10 years old, said, you know, Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be a fundraiser or an activist. But here we are today, and we are oftentimes the stewards of our organization's brands, whether we know it or not, whether we think of it or not. And really what that means is that we as frontline communicators have this challenge of moving people up a ladder of engagement. We need to reach out to people who are unaware of what we do, bring them in to the family, make them interested in what we do so that they want to follow us, like us, sign a petition, etc., and then move them up the ladder of engagement so they become supporters, activists, and if we're lucky, advocates. And that tends to happen in 3 core areas. Most of the nonprofits that I've ever worked with need to communicate for 3 reasons. They need to raise money, they need to make their programs work, and they need to do advocacy work. And for some organizations, their emphasis is on one or the other type of communication. But the brand and the essential elements that you use to tell your story these days in this digital world need to work with all audiences across all channels and tools, because there really is no difference in the user's experience of you once they visit your website, whether they are a donor or an activist or a client. And this is in stark contrast to what it was like 10 or 15 years ago, when communicating basically meant using the phone, mailing stuff, or having face-to-face meetings, right? I mean, we are living in this exceptionally noisy world where the people we're trying to reach are being bombarded by information across a lot of different channels and tools. And so as communicators, when we launch campaigns or in our just day-to-day organizational communications, we have a really tough job to do to penetrate all this noise and get our voices heard. And one of the things that I think doesn't help is that we oftentimes have lots of different people internally who are responsible for communications, who are creating different brochures, web pages, microsites, campaigns, etc. What you're seeing here is a snapshot of one organization's communications over about a year. And it's very difficult when you're sending out a lot of disparate stuff to even connect the dots for the end user's point of view. And so one of the things I want to begin by saying, and I think you'll see it in the work we're going to show you later, is that for-profits are much better than nonprofits tend to be at consistency. They know that if you see that blue box over and over and over again, you know it's Tiffany's. Or if I say Coca-Cola, you can picture that logo. You don't see big for-profit businesses changing their stuff all the time. What you see is they come up with a core message, a core visual, a core statement, and they stick to it. They use it over and over and over again. And that consistency is a big part of what helps those organizations reach us and remind us who they are and why we should connect with them. So I want to sort of use that as a way to set the stage as we get into the brand raising model, because we often, I think, dive into thinking about branding from the point of view of thinking that we should develop new stuff all the time, that new is good. And I think it's really important that before you create change, you start with a clear strategy and you're very deliberate about why you're making a change if you're going to change anything, because consistency is good. So if we're going to change something, let's do it for a good reason. And what I want to do in these next couple of slides is unpack the brand raising model. I'm going to take you through the kind of high-level overview of what we mean when we're talking about brand raising. And a lot of this has gone into greater depth in my book, which is on Amazon. But hopefully you'll get the cheat sheet from this. One of the reasons we developed this framework is that we found that a lot of organizations really struggle to connect their day-to-day communications back up to their vision and mission, and to feel like there's a clear strategy connecting those things. So the first layer of thinking about your communications we call the organizational level. And that's because these are the elements that should direct everything you do. And it begins with your vision and your mission and your values and your objectives. This is the stuff of strategic planning, right? And oftentimes the best time to think about your brand or to change your brand is often right after strategic planning. If you have a lot of clarity on these things, what we want to see organizations do is really bring it to life. I should be able to feel what the mission is, not have to read a ton of copy to get what the mission is. And the last two elements at the top of the organizational level are positioning and personality, which are marketing concepts that have been alive and well in the for-profit world for about 50 years, but we think are really useful for nonprofits too. So just to unpack those. Yeah, please, jump in, Megan.
Hey, Sarah, sorry, this is Megan. I just wanted to mention that back when you're looking at the organizational elements, those are also really great criteria to look at when you're thinking about campaigns that you might want to run, and making sure that your campaigns also correlate to your vision and your mission and your values, and especially your organizational priorities for the year.
Great, thank you. Positioning, just to define it, is the big idea you want to own in the minds of your target audiences. It's what is going to help you stand out from your peers and differentiate you from other organizations or other projects in your space. And one of my favorite examples of this is the Red Cross. And the reason I love to use the Red Cross as an example is that they do a terrific job communicating the idea that at their core they are a disaster relief organization. If I ask 500 people what they think of when they think of the Red Cross, the vast majority of them are going to say disaster relief, and a handful of people are going to say blood donations. And that's because the Red Cross has really done a great job at every point of contact reinforcing that simple idea. So as you think about your organization, and particularly as you're developing campaigns, what is the big idea you want people to associate with you, so that as they connect with you, they form a connection that is deeper than just the finite thing you might be asking them to do this month, but is something that's going to really help them want to get involved, want to move up that engagement ladder to become a supporter beyond this one initiative, and hopefully to move into being an advocate. So what I'm encouraging you to do is to think about your positioning and ideally craft it and use it to inform and evaluate your communications. If you start by saying, okay, the big idea we want people to associate with our organization is X, as you get into campaigning, campaigns often have a very specific and oftentimes finite objective. So think about, does this campaign support the big idea we want people to associate with us to? Is it helping move somebody towards a deeper level of understanding about our work? When we do this work at Big Duck as we're trying to craft positioning, we do a lot of interviewing, and we ask questions like these that are really designed to help identify the turf that an organization can own in terms of its landscape and its peers. Personality, which is the other part of the organizational level that is a kind of tried and true marketing concept, is really fun. And it's really about the tone and style you want people to associate with your organization. And a lot of times I find that if people can recall this commercial that Mac ran for a while, Apple ran, this is a great way to think about it. It's like sort of in the movie of your organization's life, who plays you? In this Mac commercial, the Mac is this kind of hip, smart, with it guy. The PC is kind of a little bumbling and buffoonish. And it's interesting to think if your organization were a person, what kind of person would it be? And what actor or individual might personify that? And how does that play out as you develop campaigns? One example in the nonprofit world is to take 3 organizations who, from a mission point of view, have something in common. They're all in the business, in this case, of fighting cruelty to animals. And to think about how their different personalities help us connect with them. If we want to volunteer or make a gift or sign a petition around an issue that's important in this area, we might to some extent look to do that because of the language that they use, the design that they use, and the way we personally connect with the personality, the feeling, the emotion of that organization. So again, just like positioning, I would really encourage you to think about your organization's personality and try to use it so you can be consistent as you launch campaigns, as you change things about your core identity. And if you've ever been through a branding process or read about one, you've probably seen these kinds of questions. If we had a mascot, what would it be? What kind of vehicle would our organization be? Things like that. Really what these questions do is they help uncover not necessarily a literal answer, but an answer that leads to an adjective or something more evocative.
And Sarah, I've got a comment there. I think that from what we see on change.org, organizations might be creating multiple petitions and then working on a lot of different campaigns, but the ones that are doing it well have a really strong organizational brand and personality that is reflected across all those campaigns and really helps to distinguish them across the noise that can be be out there on a given issue. And I think the No Kid Hungry example we get to later will really demonstrate that. So personality also helps with advocacy specifically. It seems a little contrarian, but there is room for an organization's personality to get people more engaged in an issue.
That's great. Yeah, and I can definitely see how it would connect the dots across different campaigns for an organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with positioning and personality and a clear strategic plan for your organization, you might develop or fill in the holes in your visual identity and your messaging. Your visual identity is all these elements, not just your logo, but all these other elements that you can use when you're campaigning to communicate consistency. The colors you use, the typography you use, how you use images. And in addition to that, with your messaging, your core organization is going to have its own name and maybe tagline and language that you use. But a campaign might also have its own headline or tagline. It might even have its own talking points. And ideally, those campaign-specific elements really align with the organization elements, so that when you are sitting down to craft something like a new petition, you're hopefully not starting with a blank piece of paper. You're hopefully starting with a basis that goes back to the heart of who you are organizationally, but really gives you the stuff you need to launch that killer campaign. The last layer of the brand raising model is the experiential model or level. This is where people really connect with you. They connect with you online, in print, on air, in person, and increasingly through mobile. And oftentimes what we find is that thinking about the brand or any sort of core branding changes that happen at a nonprofit is really a little bit like renovating a home. It's like going back and rethinking how things work and cleaning up maybe things that never worked in the first place, and developing a really comfortable and stable environment, so that as you invite people in, which is really what you're doing when you have campaigns, right? You're inviting people into the home of your organization and asking them to connect and engage. You want to do that in the best possible place. And I think it's important to remember that as we reach out in our campaigns, we're trying to reach people who are often very, very busy people with a lot going on, and their ability to focus on what we want from them may be really finite. And so part of what we have to do is speak a language that resonates for them. Speak to them about the benefits to them of signing this petition, of getting involved, as opposed to using organization-centric language, which is really us talking about what we need. An example of this that I love is the Just Do It tagline from Nike. A bunch of years ago I started running, and I can't tell you how many times it would be a rainy, dark morning, and I'd be trying to get out of bed and put my sneakers on to go for a run, and I would hear this tagline in my head, Just Do It. That's a great, speaking to the audience in their own language. And I would encourage you to kind of use that as a litmus test to ask yourself, how do your organization's communications measure up? Are you good at speaking a language that is audience-centric, or could you do a lot better here? So that's a little bit of theory wrapped up pretty fast. And what we're going to do is kind of now get into some exciting examples from change.org that'll help us tease out how some of this stuff comes to life.
Thanks, Sarah. That was a wonderful overview of the importance of brand and how to do it with the brand raising framework. I always love hearing you talk because I always think of something new to try or something different that we should be focusing on, even at change.org. So yeah, with that, we'd love to talk about a couple examples that we've mentioned. The first of which is Edison Wetlands Association. And again, big shout out to the folks from EWA that are on the call with us today, Dana and Johnny. These folks are near and dear to my heart because they are a grassroots nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting and restoring human health and the environment through the natural resources of New Jersey. I'm from New Jersey originally, and I've spent a lot of time in the wetlands of New Jersey, so I have a very strong emotional connection to the issues they work on and the campaigns that they organize around. So in a sense, even though I live in San Francisco, I'm part of their audience. And the campaigns that they've developed really do appeal to me because they have that strong affinity for an issue I care about. The EWA was founded in 1989 by their current ED, who's still running the organization. And there were two campaigns at the time that they were organizing around. One was about a site by the Chemical Insecticide Corporation in Edison wetlands, and some pollution there. Is actually some of the last of the Superfund money through the EPA was used to clean that area up, but there were still some issues that needed to be resolved, and they were working on that issue and also another set of issues around wetlands called the Dismal Swamp and trying to preserve that area in and around Edison. The organization has grown since 1989. They've come to cover all of the area around New Jersey in different campaigns in different communities, depending on what they think are some of the most pressing issues as far as protecting human health and the environment in New Jersey. And what I really admire about the organization, though, is that when they choose a community, and when they start to run campaigns, they go deep and they really take the time to develop strong relations within those communities. A classic community organizing that has demonstrated great results. And another interesting thing about this organization, I think, is that they've held on to their identity as the Edison Wetlands Association, but they've been able to expand that identity far beyond just the geographic origin of the organization. And in talking to Dana last week, she said that a lot of what goes into picking out the campaigns they work on is that even though people care about their natural environment and the issues that EWA organizes around, they don't have people's attention for very long. So they have to be smart, and EWA is also a relatively small staff. So they have to be smart about which issues they pick and what they choose to do. And Change.org has been a great avenue and channel for them to connect with new supporters in a few different ways. And so the first example I want to talk about was a petition that was a great victory for them. And this was targeting the US EPA about removing some toxic lead slag that had found to have been leaking along the beachfront communities of Old Bridge and Sayreville in New Jersey. This toxic lead slag had actually been used to stabilize beachfront and jetties in these communities, and it was only found out later that it was actually leaking toxic substances and creating problems and potential impacts for children's health. 40 years of exposure for this kind of this toxicity was an issue that created a lot of alarm and a lot of cause for concern for community members. The EPA did release a plan to clean up the site, but Edison Wetlands Association wanted to make sure that the EPA was held to their word and actually followed through with finalizing and executing the plan. So they used Change.org to create a petition that was basically asking the community to sign on and hold the EPA accountable. And when someone signed this petition, they're also sending a letter to the case manager of the site cleanup during a certain time period that would be included in the case record as public comment. And for the Edison Wetlands Association, as a small nonprofit, they don't really have the technical capacity or budget to host their own petition website, and having a free resource like Change.org that not only allowed them to engage their supporters on a direct campaign, but also to send emails and start a conversation with the EPA was really important. And they saw a great response. Over 4,000 folks in local communities that were affected by this issue signed on. And Dana told me that, in her opinion, Change.org is up there with Facebook and Twitter with the amount of people they can reach. And I think the reason why it was so effective for them is that they're talking about issues that connect directly to what people care about. And to me, this is the EWA brand proposition or brand value, is that when the EWA talks about a campaign, when they're raising an issue, it's something that is directly impacting local communities and is a cause for concern. There's not a lot of frivolous issues that they talk about, and that brand credibility is really clear in the work that they do. including this next campaign, which is another wonderful victory. This is a petition that they created about some legacy dumping in Ringwood State Park in New Jersey, another park that I remember going to with my family many years ago. Really beautiful state park that's heavily used by the community, a beloved green space and open space in New Jersey. And the issue here was that in the 1980s, the Ford Motor Company was found responsible for dumping toxic materials in the park. And while Ford eventually did some remediation and the site was declared clean, Ford tried to purchase the area that it contaminated, and prompting residents to fear that Ford might start to resume dumping in the park. And so same kind of an issue that really critical for public health, direct impact on the lives of those around the park, the people that use the park on a regular basis. So in conjunction with some other campaign tactics that they had already were working on, they started this petition asking I guess this is petitioning the President of the United States, but I think they're also targeting the EPA not to allow Ford Motor Company to purchase the property and use it as a toxic landfill. There was a few months process here. They did a great petition delivery at a public meeting with the EPA and Ford Motor Company officials. The gentleman here is actually a member of the local Ramapo tribe, Native American Indian tribe, who are really powerful stakeholders and representatives of just how much this issue impacts the local community and people that have been on this land, relying on this land for many, many years. And another great example of how finding the right issues and telling them through the lens of your organization and your work leads to great things. And this petition, you'll see that they had about 70,000 signatures. I think that there was some support from Change.org. We shared this with some of our members via email when this came out. But Dana told me that they were able to connect with thousands of new supporters. In fact, when you create a petition on Change.org, signers have the opportunity to opt into your email list. So there's some free list growth you can do. And Dana told me that they had thousands of people join their email list through these campaigns, and this one in particular, which, when you think about it, is basically predicated on that simple connection and interest that someone has with the work that you do. And so it's really important, whether it's defining your brand personality or even the very top of the mission and vision for your organization, right down to the campaigns you pick. Defining issues that are core to your mission and core to your identity. And I think that this is actually a great example of what Sarah was talking about, finding campaigns that run all the way back up and connect on a regular basis to your organization's mission and vision. And I'll just share another slide here to show some of the additional media coverage they got around this campaign. And then Sarah, I would love to hear if you have any thoughts about this example as an example of brand raising. But this is a shot of the executive director of the Edison Wetlands Association with a member of the Ramapo Native American tribe. And this was for a press release for an HBO documentary that was made about the issue. There is thank you for advancing that. There was an HBO documentary. There was a ton of local media coverage, which was a huge boon to the Edison Wetlands Association, and again reinforced the idea that Edison Wetlands Association is working on really critical issues that people should care about in their communities, and reinforcing the brand of community activism and public health. So Sarah, do you have any thoughts about this set of campaigns and Edison Wetlands Association?
I definitely do, and I'm just gonna go back to a couple of the slides really briefly and highlight a couple things that I really like that Edison Wetlands Association is doing here. First is I want to kind of flag that the pictures that this organization is using are really kind of awesome in terms of communicating a grassroots of the people, by the people quality. Even the animal images they have, or the images that they're using on the petition, they feel like they're snapshots taken by real people really in the trenches. And I want to just flag how much personality that communicates. It feels like if I sign this petition, I'm a part of something that isn't being produced by some kind of slick corporation. I also really like the use of language in some of these petitions. You notice this petition, as well as the first petition Lawrence talked about, both use exclamation points and are written in a way that is a call to action. So they're really speaking to the issue in a very active voice, and in a way where you can almost picture the person who's writing this like raising their fist in the air and being like, yeah, let's do it. And so I think that communicates a lot of energy and a lot of sense of momentum, that this is urgent and this is exciting stuff. And so I really like this example because I think they've been very consistent in just conveying a kind of passionate, grassroots kind of tone that is clearly true to their organization and clearly true to the campaigns that they're doing here.
Yeah, and it's a great point about the images that they use. We see that, first of all, images just in general on petitions are critical. 4 times more likely to reach a certain signature threshold if you have an image on your petition. But then the image itself, images that are featuring people that are affected by the issue, people in general, faces, eyes, direct eyes looking into you, that's a very powerful visual representation of your brand. And I think, Sarah, what you talked about as far as identifying the visual personality, thinking about that when you're creating your campaigns, or thinking about your campaign imagery as part of your visual identity and personality, is a really important and sometimes overlooked step. I know images can be hard to come by, and either you don't have someone that has a good camera, or it's expensive to buy good-looking images, but it's a really important piece of the puzzle and speaks just as much to brand in your communications as the language you use does sometimes, I think. Great. Well, I'm going to turn it over now to Megan, and she's going to walk us through our next example, which is the No Kid Hungry campaign.
Thanks so much, Lawrence. All right, so hi everybody. We're going to go ahead and chat a little bit about an organization, and it's called Share Our Strength. And if you watch the Food Network as obsessively as I do, you might already be familiar with their work. But if you don't, you might want to know that they were actually founded back in the 1980s by some folks who wanted to respond to the famine in Ethiopia and wanted to do something about the hunger crisis here in the United States. And their mission is pretty simple, but incredibly important, and it's to ensure that kids have access to the healthy food that they need every day. So for a long time, they were running sort of the way they were doing it. They were funding partners to carry out their mission. But a few years ago, they were really starting to think about the value that they were bringing to the space and to the issue that they were working on. And they decided to make sort of a strategic shift from funding partners to doing more high-touch programmatic and campaign work. So that shift led them to sort of build out a whole new organizational infrastructure so they could support that new focus. And part of that shift ended up in the launch of this pretty amazing campaign that we're going to talk about, which is called No Kid Hungry. So here you can see the campaign logo here. And the campaign was launched in 2010, so a couple years ago, and they have this incredibly powerful logo which does a great job of connecting both the campaign and the organization. And right away, as soon as you see the logo, you get a sense of what the campaign's goal is. And to get more specific about their goal, it's essentially the same as the organization's mission, and that is to end childhood hunger in America by ensuring that all children get the healthy food that they need. And what the campaign actually does on the ground is they connect kids in need with nutritious food, they teach families how to cook really healthy and affordable meals, but they also have this sort of public service element where they're aiming to make childhood hunger really a national priority and really make it part of the conversation when we're thinking about things that we need to be working on. So this is really, it's one of several programs that Share Our Strength has run over the past few years. But the thing that we heard from them over at Share Our Strength was that this one has really taken off and really resonated with our audience in both new and existing supporters, and it's taken off in a way that they weren't expecting at all. So what it did is it really engaged the public. The people who didn't immediately know what Share Our Strength was all about, they could really latch on to this idea of No Kid Hungry, because the name right there says it all, and that's something that everyone can get behind. And then additionally, their existing community of supporters who already knew how important their work was, they were totally behind this shift strategically. And so the folks at Share Our Strength actually said that they've been hearing people say things like, "I'm Team No Kid Hungry," in a way that they weren't saying about previous campaigns. So this one has really struck a nerve, and they've seen a lot of success with it. So here you can see that it's one of several of the programs that they've been running. And the thing that's interesting about No Kid Hungry is that it has appealed not just to individuals, but also to the organizations that they had been partnering with before. It really gave them a sense of community and this idea that they're part of a movement behind ending childhood hunger in America. And it's also, back to the Food Network point, gotten more brands invested in Share Our Strength and gotten them more excited about supporting the organization. So as it's evolved, as the campaign has really started to grow and mature, they've really done a great job of taking best practices that they've learned from No Kid Hungry and applying them to other campaigns that they're running and other programs. And interestingly enough, some of those campaigns and programs have actually migrated to the No Kid Hungry brand. So you can see here, they also have programs like the Big Sale and the Great American Dine Out, and those now actually support No Kid Hungry because that campaign has resonated so deeply with their audience. And the thing that's interesting about that is it's a great example of an organization sort of adapting and improvising and not being afraid to evolve their brand when they realize that evolution will better serve their mission and grow their impact in a way that staying stagnant maybe wouldn't. So here you can see the campaign that they ran on change.org. And as Lawrence and Sarah were both talking about, the evocative imagery is really incredible here. This photograph is obviously incredibly powerful. And they have a really clean and simple headline there, "Join in support of No Kid Hungry in America." And that's one of those asks that it's really hard to say no to. Everyone, no matter your political affiliation, wants to join and support the fact that no kid should be hungry in America. So we actually had a chance to speak with them a little bit about their work with change.org, and they were over at Share Our Strength, and they were talking about how useful change.org has been in growing their advocacy programs. And it's really helped them educate people who maybe didn't associate children with things like food stamps before. And once people make that association, they tend to get really fired up about it, and it just seems really unjust. And that encourages those new people that now care about this issue to get involved, and they'll make calls, they write letters to lawmakers. They really become excited about being a part of this amazing campaign. And then eventually they make change. So that strategy, this whole No Kid Hungry campaign, has really done an amazing job for Share Our Strength of recruiting a lot of new supporters for their organization. And as we often see at change.org, when those new supporters are cultivated, it also results in a lot more donations for the organization. So overall, it's been an incredible campaign to sort of watch grow and evolve, and I would highly recommend keeping your eyes on both the campaign and the organization. So I think a few interesting sort of brand-raising takeaways from this campaign. One is that the campaign name was really strong, and it really connected supporters with the mission, maybe even more than the organization name did. And when they realized that, they really started to own it as an organization and make that their public-facing campaign. They also have that really powerful logo. It's simple, it's clean. It can easily be replicated across different platforms, but you sort of immediately can identify the logo and you know what it's about. And they also, their pledge that they ran on Change, they ran a pledge instead of a petition. What it does is it really engages those people that sign up from the start with very clear campaign objectives. So this campaign definitely benefits from the fact that it has a very clear end goal, which is having no kid be hungry in America. And you can sort of watch the progress towards that goal, and it's very clear and you understand exactly where you're at in fulfilling that mission. So Sarah, I'd love to hear if you have any thoughts on this campaign as well.
Yeah, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with everything you said, and I also think you made a really, really important point early on as you started talking, Megan, which is the awesomeness of having your campaign name be a call to action, be the goal. I really love that about this campaign. And I also love your point about how Share Our Strength is kind of linking itself to this campaign in the logo. I also think that this is a great example of sometimes how less can be more. I mean, they are using white space and this simple orange color with black type. And it's really powerful stuff. And they're really letting these looking you in the eye images of these kids communicate the emotions. So I think one of the challenges a lot of us face is we live in this world where we can now use a lot of color, and it's tempting to use a lot of color. I think this is a great example of how sometimes restricting your color palette can communicate consistency and communicate a type of elegance in your organization's personality really, really effectively. So I love the simplicity of this design and the power that it both connotes to this campaign, but also that it helps link back to the mother brand.
Yeah, and I think building off that idea about the images as well, let me just pull up that slide. You know, I think that one of the things that is so powerful about this image is that it literally puts a face to the issue. And the issue of childhood hunger in America can feel very overwhelming and very daunting. And it might be so overwhelming that you don't even know how to make a step towards ending that. But when you see the face of a child that is probably hungry right now, that really motivates you to want to take action, and it gives you, it really puts a face to the issue and makes you want to get involved and help this one child out. Great. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lawrence.
Thanks. Thanks, Megan. Yeah, this is such a great campaign, and I love everything, top down, as Sarah was talking about in the earlier part of the webinar. So we have some time for questions. A couple questions have come in, and we'll walk through those. I thought maybe, Sarah, do you want to share with us what's coming up next with Big Duck before we get into questions?
Yeah, sure. I would be happy to. Thank you. If you visit our website, which is bigducknyc.com, you can learn more about what we do, who our clients are, see some examples of our work. You can also sign up to get our monthly e-news and check out our blog. We give a lot of workshops and webinars, and just a few things that are coming up. And again, these are all on our website. If you're in the Brooklyn area, we're doing Is It Time to Rethink Your Website in October. Also giving a webinar on campaigns as an experience of your brand, which will be a kind of a slightly different look at the same topic. And we also have a lot of recorded webinars on our website that you can watch anytime you want for free. So check that out if you want more on this topic. And lastly, if you are interested to hear more about brand raising, in addition to some of the stuff on our website, this is what the book looks like. It's available on Amazon. I would love to hear from you if you have read it, used it. Tell me what you think. So yeah, should we do some change.org resources and then take some questions?
You bet. Yeah, so just real quick, we also host webinars pretty regularly, and we try and share some of the greatest NP Tech content that's out there. So you can find us at change.org/organizations with some resources about effective online campaigning. We're on the social web at Twitter at change.orgs and facebook.com/change.orgs. And if you have any questions at all about using change.org, either our free petitions or our paid supporter acquisition services, feel free to email me at lawrence@change.org. And so let's turn our attention to some questions here. Let's see. So there's a question from Rachel Datz. Says she works with an organization called Active Minds, and it's a national student mental health nonprofit on college campuses across the country. And so she's asking about the challenges that they're facing creating images to engage our audience. Essentially the question is, how do you brand raise around a hard-to-communicate topic like mental health?
Yeah, we've had some clients in that space, Rachel, and I'll touch on something that I think is specific to you, but then also something that I think is broader and relevant to hopefully a lot of people on this webinar. In the mental health world, there is, I think, a challenge about, do you talk about mental illness, which is a sort of negative spin, or do you talk about mental health, which is a positive spin? Your question is specific about images, and I think I would encourage you to, if photography doesn't feel like the right medium, to consider illustration or graphic elements, and to, again, from a brand raising point of view, think about the personality you want to communicate. Your name, Active Minds, feels very positive to me and feels like it would lead to a personality that is sort of focusing on the mental health piece and an upbeat and aspirational side. And I would think about using illustration or graphic elements, maybe beyond photography, that help set that tone. I think the larger issue that this does flag is when you strategically focus on the problem and when you strategically focus on the solution. And I would encourage any organization to really think about that as they think about the personality they want to communicate and the position that they want to kind of own in their peer landscape.
Great. Yeah, that's a real good distinction to make, problem versus solution. All right, another question from Alana Posner. And Alana says that her nonprofit is a members-based organization, and a lot of communication on social media just goes out to those members. And we're hoping to create awareness for our brand on social media, but wondering how best to do so. So maybe I think Alana is asking a little bit about how to use their brand to get beyond their core membership and their core constituency.
Yeah, I have some thoughts on this. I bet Megan does too. Do you want me to chime in, or Megan, you want to go for this one?
Go for it first, Sarah.
I mean, I think the thing is that social media, first of all, positioning and personality can help you in social media. You can use positioning and personality to guide how that conversation goes. But also you can use social media to direct people back to those petitions, back to your website, back to the places where they're going to take action. And I would really encourage you to think of some of those social media channels as kind of an extension of the party you're throwing in your house, and as a way to engage people in conversation. But then through those conversations, encourage them to visit some of your core organizational kind of homes and take some action.
And I think just to add on that, I think that's exactly right, but it's also important to make sure that you're engaging strategically on social media, so making sure that you take the time to understand exactly what audience it is that you do want to be in touch with beyond your members, thinking about where it is that they might be, depending on their demographic. They might be on Pinterest as opposed to Twitter, and that's where you can devote your organizational resources to. So it's really a lot about connecting, making sure that your mission sort of syncs up with the way that you're communicating about it, and that you understand exactly who it is you want to reach before you just start kind of spending time on every new shiny object that comes out on social media, which is a problem that I know is hard to avoid. So good luck.
Great. One more question here from Robert, and he asks about petitions in particular. He says that his organization doesn't do issue advocacy, but rather on-the-ground international community development work. So how could a petition work for them? I'll chime in with a couple of thoughts here and try and tie it to brand and communications. Petitions really, when they're used in the advocacy context, are intended to make a specific change and to influence someone to help you make that change. But that's only one function of petitions. Petitions can also be used as a way to connect with new supporters that may help you raise funds or raise issue awareness, and folks that aren't on the ground in the communities that you're trying to do the development work in. And actually, pledges are often used by organizations that aren't doing direct advocacy for that purpose. So you may, if you're, let's just say that your organization is trying to do community development work in Africa, and you are trying to bring clean water to a community in Africa, you might create a pledge and focus it around that value proposition, that mission statement for your organization, which is providing clean water to communities everywhere, and ask people to sign a petition or to sign a pledge supporting that work. That then becomes the start of a relationship between those supporters, as you tell them about who your organization is, what the work you do is, how important it is, and how it really connects to their lives. You know, we all drink water. It's 95% of our bodies. That's not the right statistic, I know. But there are common connections that we can draw upon to pull people into our work. And I think that's really the personality that Sarah was talking about. And if you can use that effectively when creating a petition or a pledge, then that becomes an entry point for you to create a great community of supporters that help you with the fundraising and the other advocacy or just support you need to do that development work internationally. I hope that helps a little bit. I don't know, Megan or Sarah, if you have additional thoughts on that.
I think you definitely hit the nail on the head there, Lawrence. Robert, we've seen quite a few organizations probably similar to yours that have seen a lot of success on Change.org with running a pledge just around the issues that they're focusing on, because that way you can attract new supporters and eventually new donors who are going to be really excited about the work you're doing and can sort of support the on-the-ground work that you're doing overseas. So I would definitely suggest sort of playing around with a pledge, maybe rather than a direct advocacy petition.
Great. Well, I think there's one more question. I'll throw it out there, and this is a bit more of a niche audience, but Gabriella asked, do you have any recommendations on getting in touch with an organization's mission if you're working with more than one organization? And I think that she's talking about from a consulting context, but you know, I think that from my perspective, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, Sarah, I think each organization, well, it really depends on what you're doing with the organization and how you're helping them, but each organization is unique, and you need to spend the time to learn what their values are, what their mission statement is, and I think that as an outsider, sometimes there can be, you need to spend the time to do the research and get to know the organization and its personality before you can start recommending changes. But of course, that's what Big Duck specializes in, and Sarah, I would, maybe if you could speak to some of the challenges that you face in helping organizations craft stronger mission statements that connect more deeply with their day-to-day campaigning work.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question, and I would add a couple things to what you said, Lawrence. First, I think that it's really important as a consultant to remember that you are an expert in whatever it is you're an expert in. In Big Duck's case, we're an expert in nonprofit communications. But your client is an expert in their content. So if you work at a nonprofit and you're in the trenches with that work every day, you know more about the content of your work than the consultants you're working with, and that's okay. As a consultant, you don't need to know everything that they know. You need to know the best practices for your space. And I have found, and I think our team has found, that it's really helpful to try to visit the organization's programs in the field if that's possible. Big Duck is based in Brooklyn. Our clients are national. Sometimes they're in New York, and we love when they're in New York to go and visit them, see the office, see the place programs are happening, and sort of drink the Kool-Aid a little bit so that we really get a feel for what it's like in the trenches. With that said, a lot of times the people who are going to support a nonprofit, particularly on a petition, are never going to have the opportunity to experience it firsthand exactly that same way. And so it is really important to listen as a consultant to what you're being told and to try to translate it into language or into understanding that is it's universal. Part of what we have to do is we have to take people on the outside on a journey into the inside, up that engagement ladder. So as a consultant, if what they're saying doesn't make sense to you and you're getting paid to pay attention, then it probably won't make a lot of sense to external supporters either, and that's worth paying attention to.
Excellent. We had a couple questions come in the last minute. Unfortunately, don't have the time to get to them, but as I mentioned, my email is up on the screen. Be happy to talk with you after the webinar is done via email or the social media. However you'd like to get in touch with me, please feel free to do so. Just want to thank Sarah for joining us. Sarah, it's a total pleasure to have you here sharing your infinite wisdom about branding for nonprofits.
Thanks. It's really fun to do this with you guys. Thanks for including me.
Yeah, and of course, Megan Tyke, my esteemed colleague, thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. It was a pleasure.
And thanks to all of you who could join us today. Hope this provided some good background about how to improve your nonprofit's communications through a stronger brand. Hope to see you online sometime soon, and have a great day. Take care, everybody.